Hey guys, I'm Scott, and this is Cooking with Breeo. Today we're gonna make a delicious holiday recipe, something for when the weather's getting pretty cold out. We're doing tri-tip steak with roasted carrots, mashed potatoes. We're cooking the potatoes right in the fire pit. And then we're gonna have a little bit of homemade bread, cooking it in a kettle on the side. Now you don't have to make all of this at once. It's a lot of stuff. You can pick something from this video that you'd like to make, but we're gonna make it all together today and enjoy it with friends and family. Here we go. We are gonna marinate this tri-tip steak. This is a 2-pound steak. First thing we're gonna do is trim off some of this fat cap. So this one's not really too bad from the butcher. We're just gonna trim some stuff off here. It's okay to have a little bit of fat on it. You just don't want some real big pieces of gristle. Nobody likes gristle. It's not quite the fat like you would get on like a ribeye or something like that either. It's a little more, it's a little less desirable, I should say. We have a little bit of garlic powder, garlic salt, and then we have some seasoned salt. Now this is Lowry's seasoned salt, but you can use any seasoned salt. And then pepper, salt, of course. I like to use coarse salt. Now something to keep in mind with coarse salt is when you're sprinkling on, it'll seem like you're not, it'll seem like you're putting a small amount on, but a little bit of coarse salt goes a long way. And then I have a little bit of sugar as well. Just kind of brings that whole rub together. And I'm just gonna kind of pat that in, get a little messy with it. You don't want to leave any of that seasoning go to waste. And we are going to be putting this all into a bag, the rest that's on this board. But I like doing it this way. Some people make the marinade first and then dip it in it, but I actually like doing it this way. I feel like it gets into the meat a little bit more and just helps tenderize it a little bit better. So I'm going to go right in with into the Ziploc bag. And I'm gonna sprinkle some olive oil on it. And then I'm gonna dump the rest of the seasoning in, kind of swish it around. You can use a knife or whatever to scoop it up. You just don't wanna waste any of that. You want that all to be on there. Watch your fingers, of course. Put that all in there. I'm gonna give a little dash of olive oil on the other side. And then what I like to do is get most of the air out of it. And then that's what you're looking at. You can set this right in the fridge. It's not gonna really leak too much, as you can see, and that's gonna be stinking delicious. So let that sit for 8 hours if you can, overnight. The longer it sits, the better. And if you're short on time, if you just let it sit while you get the grill hot, whatever, you're really gonna be in good shape. Either way, that's gonna deliver some really delicious flavor. Grab the all-purpose bread flour. It's 3 1/4 cup, and we're gonna dump it right into a bowl. And then we have some active dry yeast and some salt. Now, yeast and salt don't mix that well together until the yeast is incorporated. So I'm gonna wait to add the salt at the end. Gonna sprinkle a packet of instant yeast. And then I'm also gonna grab some warm water. Now a little trick is you want the water to be warm but not too hot or it'll kill the yeast. I just put it in the kettle that we're gonna be cooking over. That way it warms up. It's pretty chilly outside, so it's at room temperature now. I'm gonna add the water to this. So we have those ingredients in there. You're just gonna give it a little mix with a spatula. Just incorporate most of it together. I'm gonna add just a tablespoon of salt, coarse sea salt, and then I'm gonna trim up some of this rosemary. Now you can add whatever you'd like to this. You can add garlic powder, you can add garlic, cut up garlic. I'm just gonna grab a few sprigs of this rosemary, chop it up. So of the rosemary, you don't want too many huge pieces in there, just some little guys. That'll add some nice flavor, especially when that gets cooked. It just gives it some nice flavor and texture as well. And then you want to incorporate all of that into your dough. And then once you get it to this point, you can knead it by hand a little bit. All right, I'm gonna pull it out onto the cutting board and finish it up that way. That's starting to come together nicely. Smooth out, kind of press and fold until it starts to kind of all come together and you're starting to get a nice dough. So now it's gonna go into a grease bowl. Place it right in there. We're gonna cover it and then let it sit in a little bit warmer than room temp place for about an hour, hour and a half. The whole goal here is to keep the oxygen out of it. And then that can go either right into an oven or a warm place the heat's not turned on. Or what I'm gonna do is just set it right over here. Obviously you don't want it to start cooking, but that's just gonna keep this warm enough. So we're getting ready to put the bread on. We've had it sitting for about an hour and 20 minutes. And the key thing here is I've been heating this kettle, this cast iron kettle up. So the reason I'm heating that up, we are trying to make an oven with this kettle. So I've had that on here for a little while. You don't want it scorching hot, but you do want to kind of create an oven. And so it's really important to have a lid that goes over top. So that lid you can set right on there and it's gonna form its own oven just like you'd have inside. And then we're gonna put the bread in there. So we'll let that get hot. We just have a few more minutes with that lid on and then we're gonna put the bread right in. We're gonna go with parchment paper right into the cast iron just to protect it from being black. And then we're gonna go right on top with the dough ball, put the lid on, and we will be good to go. So like all outdoor cooking, it's a little delicate over the wood. You just kind of got to go with feel, right? If you feel like it's too hot, raise the sucker up. If it's too cold, you got to put it down a little bit. And we're going to put logs on top of this so it gives kind of that even cook all the way around it. And try to get that nice and level. I'm just going to grab some of these logs that we put in a little while ago. And go right on top. And with this kettle, you have to have even weight. So put a log on either side. And that should be really good. And what that's gonna help do is cook the top and the bottom at the same time and hopefully have a nice even cook. And we'll check it after probably about like 25 minutes, 30 minutes. We'll check it to see what it's doing in there. It's probably gonna need a little longer time than that, but we certainly don't wanna overcook it or burn it. So we'll check in a little bit and make an adjustment if needed. We're gonna get ready for the potatoes. With the potatoes, we don't want a ton of flame right where the potatoes are. I'd like to nestle those into some coals if I can. And we're just gonna set them there and we're gonna try something. A lot of times people put potatoes in aluminum foil. We're gonna poke them so they don't explode, but then we're gonna let that skin be the nice barrier that it needs between the fire, and then we'll plan on scooping it out later. So we'll give it a whirl, let this fire die down just for a minute or so, and put the potatoes right in. Typically with potatoes, you would season them like crazy before you cook them. Because we're throwing them right in the fire, I don't wanna put any olive oil on, I don't wanna put any seasoning on them until after we pull them out. We're gonna scoop the mashed potatoes out and then we'll add our seasoning. Otherwise, all that seasoning is gonna do is burn, char it up even more, so we don't wanna do that. So what I am gonna do, I'm gonna take a fork, and I don't need to go crazy with this, but I'm basically just gonna put one stab in each of those. That way it can breathe, doesn't blow up our pit. But I don't wanna create too much open holes in there, otherwise it's gonna get burned inside. And we want the texture on the inside to be cooked nice. We're just gonna peel the layers off the back. So I'm gonna toss these potatoes on and I'm gonna put them right on this side that's not flaming up near as much. Now remember, we did just put wood on the fire here a little bit ago. We got some good flame going on. I'm just gonna set these in. We're gonna get these carrots ready. You could actually cook them with the skin on. Some people like that, some people don't. So I am gonna peel them, but because you're roasting them, you can kind of do it over the fire that way. But I am gonna real quick peel them. We are gonna cut them in half. Carrots take a while to cook if you cook them just right over the fire. So we are gonna cut them in half, and that'll make them really nice. So when you cut, we're just gonna cut once right down the middle, and we're gonna keep them whole otherwise. So there you have it. That's how we're gonna season them, and then we'll put them right on the fire just like that. If you have a pan like this, you can kind of just set them all out in a line, and I'm just gonna sprinkle some olive oil right over them, and we'll kind of roll it around in there. Salt. Carrots are very sweet, and they kind of caramelize when you cook them over the fire. It's really neat. Salt and pepper. And then we are gonna add a little rosemary. What I'm gonna do with the rosemary is I'm actually just gonna cut these up a little bit and kind of mix them in with it so that all these little rosemary things don't fall down through. So I'm just gonna kind of cut these in half, just like that. And we probably won't even really be eating any of these rosemary petals or needles, whatever you call them, but they will give it some flavor as they cook. I'll try to keep them kind of on top of it, similar to like if you're cooking a steak. And then you just kind of marinate these all around. Oh baby, that's gonna be good. Try to cover everything with them. And then you can kind of let them sit like that a little bit too until you're ready to throw them on. And so I'm just gonna put these on here. We want these to roast rather than grill. We don't wanna grill them too much. So I'm probably gonna end up raising this up a little bit, but that's why I have them off to the side so they don't overcook or anything like that. Now I'm just gonna rest the rosemary right on top after I get them all on here. Might as well get my hands dirty. So I'm placing the flat side down on all of these. That way they can cook evenly, and then I will flip them. And I'm going right on top with some of that rosemary. That is gonna be delicious. A big part of cooking over the Breeo is fire management. You gotta figure out how to keep a lot of things going at once. Now the fire's kicked up a little bit, I'm gonna raise this kettle up so that bread doesn't get overcooked. And that way I can swing this outpost in there a little bit better. The name of the game here is being flexible and just kind of adjusting to what's going on. So we're gonna put this steak on. We wanna save all this goodness in here to go with the gravy. I'm actually gonna put the beef stock in here, swish it around, and then we'll cook that over the edge here in a pan. So this steak's gonna go right on, super hot. Oh baby, that's what you want to hear. You want to hear that sizzle. That means you got it nice and hot. But with a steak like this, it's a little bit of a different cut than a traditional like New York strip, ribeye, or even a filet, because it's all in one big piece. And we want to sear it, but then we got to get it off the heat just to give it some time to roast and to cook. It's going to really tie in well with these carrots, the potatoes, and then the bread. I'm going to get the gravy going now. So with this gravy, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna pour it right into what we've been marinating this steak. There's just a little bit of wonderful seasoning in there. So we gotta use all that seasoning, and it's actually gonna get some of that steak flavor as well because it's been sitting there overnight. And I'm just gonna dump it right in to get all that delicious goodness. Swish it around. And then we're gonna go right into this stainless steel pan, and that we're gonna cook on the edge of this thing. Now we do got to bring this to a boil because there's obviously some raw meat with steak. It's not as big of a deal, but we do want to bring that to a boil. So we got some beef broth. We got some salt, and I'm just gonna go right in with it because we're gonna whisk it all together. We got some pepper. We have a little bit of flour as well, just to thicken it. All right. And then I'm gonna whisk that together real nice. And we are gonna add just a little bit of water as well. And then we're gonna let this right on the edge here. You wanna make sure it's a nice flat surface, obviously. But we're gonna let that heat up and get boiling. If I have to move it over to this side, I can if it's not hot enough, but we're gonna let that gravy go. And all this should come together pretty well here. So that steak's been on there for a little while. I am gonna flip that. I wanna check the potatoes as well. We wanna get those off, let them cool down a little bit. They are looking good from here. First thing, I'm gonna flip this bad boy. Oh yeah, baby. We got a nice sear on that. That is what I'm talking about. That looks so delicious. And we're not overcooking it. We're trying not to cook it too fast. We just wanna let it roast now. All right, so we're gonna check these potatoes. I'm gonna pull one of them out. As you can see, it gets really dark on the one side. I'm not worried about that at all. Oh yeah, baby. We are looking good on the potatoes. I think they're pretty much ready to pull out. I'm gonna get them out of here and let them cool a little bit. That way when we peel them and pull all the innards out, it's gonna be really good. We have these potatoes. They've been sitting out a little bit, which is really important just so it's not so hot, doesn't kill your hands. All you're gonna do is cut them in half, and then we're gonna scoop out the inside. And they're nice and soft. They're not gonna have a ton of extra flavor yet. We're adding that. But they are gonna have some good smoky flavor, which is just gonna be delightful. And they kind of look like little coals. That's where they came from, so. Oh yeah. So we're gonna scoop all these out, make our mashed potatoes. Now we have to keep in mind, we gotta keep an eye on a couple things over here, mostly the steak. And then I wanna keep an eye on that gravy as well. It takes, depending on how much heat you have going, it takes a little bit of time to boil, and we wanna reduce that down. So sometimes it's good to get that on there a little bit earlier. But now we're gonna scoop some of these mashed potatoes out. Get yourself a big spoon, scoop it right out, and we're gonna go right in. Now you're gonna think that this is gonna be a little grainy. That's the way these roasted potatoes are, but they're actually very soft. And when we add the sour cream, the butter, the milk, it's just gonna be delightful. So get in there with it, go into your bowl, and scoop it right out of the skin. All right, so we got our last potato here. We're gonna set all these off to the side. And add the other ingredients now. So now's where you kind of spice it up a little bit. Potatoes need a good bit of salt, they need a good bit of pepper because they're so dense. You wanna use a good bit of salt and then just taste as you go. That's the big thing. Don't be afraid to taste stuff as you go. See if it needs something else. Add a little salt, add a little pepper. It's also important to keep in mind, you can always add more salt, you can't take salt away. So don't add too much salt right away. So we got our salt, pepper. Gonna get a little butter in here as well. Let that start to melt. Just gonna cut this into a couple pieces here. That way it can melt a little bit nicer. And we're gonna mash all this up as well. Now, I have a potato masher. If you don't have this, you can use a fork. Use the backside of a fork or even a spoon. It's nice when you have a potato masher, but you certainly don't need one. And now you're just gonna press all that out and incorporate the salt, pepper. The key also to getting smooth potatoes is to mash them before you put your milk or your sour cream in. Otherwise, sometimes it's hard, you get little chunks. And chunks in potatoes aren't the worst thing in the world. They're all mashed pretty well. You want them to be nice and smooth. And even with that butter melting in there already, it's just, oh, it's delicious. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of milk. The milk's actually gonna cool it down a little bit as well. I'm not going in with a ton. You can always add some more milk. And then I'm just gonna scoop some sour cream in here as well. And all this stuff is kind of to taste. If you like more sour cream flavor, add more sour cream. If you like them more creamy, add more milk. I'm gonna taste these, see what they're, they're actually really delicious. I actually don't think I'm gonna do too much. The salt is really good. I just did a nice big pinch of salt, probably about a tablespoon. And I think this was like 6 or 7 potatoes. And then pepper to taste. And if you wanna get fancy, what we can do is add a little bit of thyme on here as well. Now thyme's always kind of tricky to get off the stems. And you can eat these stems, but it's pretty nice if you can just pull these little flowers off of them and toss them in there without getting too much stems. But it just really adds a nice, really more of a nice aroma. You'll get some of that flavor as well. And because we couldn't add any seasoning while we were cooking the potatoes, now we add it. I'm also gonna flip this steak a little bit. Finish it off on the side that hasn't been touched yet. So I'm just gonna kind of let it finish up on that side. That'll allow it not to get too like seared, but it'll allow it just to finish out. I also want a little bit of sear on either side because this is a bigger, a whole piece of steak. It'll be really nice. And gonna get this gravy back on here. Stir it up real quick. It's starting to thicken. And that is getting really, really nice. A few minutes, this is all gonna be wrapped up, should finish up together, and we are in for a treat. I'm gonna check the steak temp real quick. And we are right about 140, which is where you want, so I'm actually gonna move that sucker to the side. We just pulled the carrots off. They're sitting over here. We pulled the steak off about 10 minutes ago. We wanted to let it rest. Still got the bread on and need a little bit more time. Got the gravy on. We're just letting that reduce and thicken. But we are ready to cut into this steak, and I am very excited. So the key here with these tri-tips is to cut against the grain, and you can tell by pulling apart the top, you can kind of see where the grain is, and so I'm gonna try my best to cut against the grain, and we want to cut this pretty thin. And it's actually really nice and tender and juicy and delicious, and oh my, I'm excited about this. Whenever I'm making steak for friends, I always definitely like to, try it because I don't want to give it to them if I don't really like it. So these tri-tips, they roast a little bit more, and you can hear that crunch and the juiciness. And so I'm gonna just cut a little piece because this is all of our favorite parts. Oh man. We got the crunch on the outside, tenderness in the middle. It actually really pulls apart well. Man, that's good. Saltiness. We got a little bit of the sweetness from the sugar. We are gonna dig that. So keep cutting this here. Of course, we have some juices running out even though we let it rest. All right, we're gonna take this bread off here. Oh baby, now we are cooking. Look at that, beautiful. Oh my word. That is the sound that you want to hear. That's the look that you want. We got a little bit of burnt on the bottom, and like I said, that's gonna be fine. That is gonna be fantastic. Look at that. So we did add a little bit of logs at the very end, just to crisp it up on the outside. And that gravy thickened up just beautifully onto the mashed potatoes. A little bit on the steak. We're gonna slice into this bread and see how we did. Oh, that is what you wanna hear. I mean to tell you what. Look at that. Oh my goodness. That is gonna be so delicious with a little bit of butter. Now I'm just gonna fix this piece up because I really wanna try it. A little bit of butter on there. So there it is, it's all set. Now it's time to dig in. I'm excited to dig into this. We got our tri-tip steak with delicious rosemary, carrots, mashed potatoes that were cooked right in the fire pit. Really, really easy, really fun. And then we got our delicious homemade bread cooked in the kettle over the Breeo. And I'm telling you guys right now, grab your friends, grab your family, have an awesome day cooking around the fire, and then don't hesitate to dig in. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Cooking with Breeo, and stay tuned next time.